My name is Mike Butler. I am playing Renfield in the production of Dracula. Renfield, script description is a lunatic. I try to dig a little bit deeper than that. Renfield's troubled. He is a servant of Dracula who is living in an asylum that will eventually be the resting place of Dracula for coming from Europe. And he's got to keep as much control as possible, but again, he's gone a little crazy. Renfield himself, I think he's nice underneath, but he's scary as any character I've ever imagined I would ever play. I like him a lot. I like him a lot. He's not as charming as Dracula, and he's not as forceful as the other villains in the play, but he does have a sense of urgency in being a servant of Dracula. So it's neat to step into this. I got involved with Quick as a Wink because a couple of people who were heavily involved in Quick as a Wink came to see one of my shows, and they were kind of desperate for new actors and they just tried to recruit, and I got involved. My first show was called Golf the Musical, which was only seen by one audience because it was a specialty show. And then I did Little Princess, and it just kind of snowballed after that. I'm generally a play actor as opposed to a musical actor, so I've done 5 or 6 of their plays, and then I was asked to direct Grease, and then eventually I directed Shrek. I have had the lead in a musical called The Drowsy Chaperone, which was one of my absolute favorite roles, but being a director has opened the doors for a whole bunch of other projects, and I love community theater. I just get involved with whatever company is doing something that sparks my interest. Dracula certainly sparked my interest. There's always those elements of suspense, mystery, thriller, horror, all of that stuff. I've got a ton of favorite movies. I'm a big Alfred Hitchcock fan, but in comparing it to Dracula, I would have to say that my favorite scary movie is the original 1978 Halloween. When I was a kid, I watched horror movies more than I watched cartoons because horror movies, there was something so cool about it, and I had older siblings that got scared very easy, and so they would always get me to come into the room, and they would just keep saying to me, this is fake, don't get scared, this is fake. They would be talking themselves around not getting scared, where I was like, yeah, this is kind of cool. I like this stuff. But Halloween was the first horror movie that could happen to me. That's why it was scary to me. Somebody could escape from a mental institution and go around dressed as William Shatner and kill people on Halloween night. Friday the 13th, all that kind of stuff didn't really seem like reality to me. Halloween scared me, and it still scares me. It's been 40 years for the both of us since that came out and since I was born, and I still watch it and I still jump all the time during that movie. The horror genre, to me, it represents so much more than what other people see it as. Some people just like to go to the movies and jump and scream and act like a fool and pretend that they're not scared and everything. The horror genre is very important to me because I take it just as serious as comedy, as thrillers, as drama, as anything, because you have to create something that isn't happening, just like drama, just like comedy, and it's tougher because it could end up being very laughable or not taken very seriously. I think people like horror movies because it creates a bit of togetherness, just like most movies do, or most genres do. You can relate to people in sad situations, you can relate to people in dramatic situations. Horror movies, I go to horror movies all the time and I see people sitting there with a group of friends and they're scared. They jump, and then they all look at each other like, oh, you were more scared than I was, you were more scared, and then they talk about it afterwards, and they get grossed out, and, I think over the years, the seriousness of horror has gotten a little lost with multiple sequels of movies and all this kind of stuff. In terms of literature, thinking of Dracula, the gothic beauty of older novels like Dracula, like The Picture of Dorian Gray, to use your imagination to think about how gorgeous those times were and how scary the era was. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have, you didn't even have electricity back then. So you were candlelight and this eerie mood and fog and all that. It's an amazing thing if you can put yourself back in there. So I'm hoping that people who are still interested in it are interested for those elements and not just, ooh, I want to see some blood or I want to see some gore, that kind of stuff. Gore loses it. The eeriness, the effect, if you're doing it correctly, it can be very, very effective. So I love it. I love it. I don't think the horror genre is ever going to disappear. I think Bram Stoker, very much like Charles Dickens, you can even date it back to Greek mythology, just had it right. The imagination, the atmosphere you create, then adding on these very layered characters and the look. Like when you're reading about Dracula coming into a room, you turn around and see if he's right there. It is just written so well and such detail. I mean, this is why things like The Lord of the Rings is so popular, because the detail, the research that goes into it is so well done that you feel like you're there, you feel like you're part of it. I think that Dracula stands up because of those elements. No one has written anything like Dracula in terms of how good it is. There are, people that have tried and done okay, but reading Dracula now, you can't tell me that it's not going to be the same in 50 years. It is just that good of a piece of literature. I hope that in 50 years I've done something that someone's like, yeah, I remember when he did that. I doubt it. Not as good as Dracula, but it's just that way. You think of Frankenstein, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, Jane Austen books, even like Anne of Green Gables. Those things are so well written that they are timeless and they speak to people forever. It's wonderful. When I was a kid, I'm a Stephen King nut. So it's funny that I actually saw Salem's Lot before I saw any version of Dracula. I got on the Stephen King train very early because of my sister. So I was reading everything. You read The Stand, you read It, you read Cujo, Christine. So then you get interested in old cars, you get interested in St. Bernard's, and then you read Salem's Lot. And then you see the movie, and it's this whole cool, like, that's a neat vampire, like, living dead thing. And you watch Return of the Living Dead, it all starts to pile together. And then I watched the original Nosferatu with Max Schreck, and, then you hear all these stories about how he was a real vampire, and he actually ate people on set. And I'd have to say that Salem's Lot was my first introduction to cool vampires. You watch things like Nicolas Cage's, what is that movie he was in where he was a vampire? It was just awful. And then, Once Bitten and all these other, My Boyfriend's a Vampire. But Salem's Lot was super cool when I was a kid. And that would probably be the other Dracula story that inspired me to really love that element of the horror genre. I always say I'm afraid of two things: heights and bugs when they're on me. I don't mind if I am in a room and I see spiders all over the floor, but the minute one of them is on me, things go down. It gets real. Heights is one that I feel like I've semi-conquered because I've gone up in a parachute or gone up in an air balloon. I've zip lined and all that stuff. Yeah, I was scared, and I can't wear those clothes ever again, but heights, it depends on if I'm with someone. They might help me out. Bugs is another thing. I do not like when bugs are on me. Just one of those things. I've had like June bugs fly in my hair, and I've almost beaten myself to death trying to get it off me. That would probably be about it. I keep my cool pretty well with other things. Like, I don't mind most things people are afraid of, but I would say that Bugs on Me does it.